We'll go ahead and kick things off. Hi, my name is Molly Wheeler. I am one of the deputy directors at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today on Is Your Data Secure? Protecting your municipality's data from hackers, a cybersecurity journey. Our two speakers are Travis Scott, the Information Security Manager with the Utah Cyber Center, as well as Ben Clapp, a cyber threat intelligence analyst at the Statewide Information and Analysis Center. That's a mouthful. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please put them in either the chat or Q&A box. We'll try to keep an eye on both, and we'll make sure that your questions are answered. We are also recording this webinar and we'll be posting it later. So with that said, Ben and Travis, I will hand it off to you.
Okay, great. You can hear us okay? Okay, I'll kick it off then. So as Molly introduced, I'm Travis Scott. I'm with the Utah Cyber Center. Specifically, I'm over a team that helps out local government entities in the cybersecurity space. So as noted today, kind of the theme that we're taking here is that we're on a cybersecurity journey. The reason kind of why we went with that is because in reality, cybersecurity isn't something that you just do quickly. It is actually a journey. And you do get to certain goals throughout that journey, but there's always opportunities or times that we should kind of check in and look at those things that we have accomplished and kind of where we're at on that journey. As probably many of you guys know, there's a lot of hackers out there. They're targeting entities specifically, looking for vulnerabilities that they can exploit. Or they're just kind of scanning and randomly finding those vulnerabilities and then attacking entities. So there's a lot of hackers out there, a lot of opportunity to go after entities like municipalities. And so we're hoping that, whether you're an advanced entity and you have a good IT system, a good cybersecurity, or whether you're just starting out, that we're kind of giving you sort of a roadmap for where to go or kind of how to combat this cybersecurity issue and make sure that you're on a good path forward, basically. So to introduce a little bit more, as stated, I'm with the Utah Cyber Center. The Cyber Center actually kind of got started around 2014 as more of a cyber task force that involved some FBI and some law enforcement. And the main focus was really to kind of go after criminals and any type of attacks that they had done, and hopefully go after them and with the law enforcement aspect and the rest of them. So fast forward, many years as that kind of went forward, the Utah and specifically the Division of Technology Services that I work for saw many opportunities to kind of help out municipalities along the way, whether they had been attacked and they needed assistance. And so and then there took more notice from the legislature and stuff like that in the cybersecurity space. I think some major events that happened that kind of resulted in this was the Colonial Pipeline attack that happened several years ago against a private entity that quickly kind of became a government problem, even though it was a private entity issue. And then kind of what you saw happen out of COVID with moving to more online based things, as well as that problem that COVID posed both in the private and the government space. So seeing those things and seeing the attacks happen, basically the legislature saw fit that they wanted to actually put the Utah Cyber Center in statute. So what you see there on the screen is basically what the Cyber Center consists of. So that main block in the center is the main partners in statute, Division of Technology Services, my group, which is the local government outreach, as well as our connection to enterprise security, and then the Department of Public Safety. But they wanted to ensure, taking into account COVID and Colonial Pipeline, that we had all the right players and cooperating partners. And so we actually do coordinate with Utah Education and Telehealth Network, CISA. We have some city and county government reps, FBI, et cetera. And so it kind of gives you a good idea of the Cyber Center and where we're coming from. Later on, we're going to talk a little bit more about tools and things that we have available that can help you on this cybersecurity journey. But for right now, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Ben, to continue.
Thanks, Travis. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk cyber and look at some fun slides. I promise I'm a real person and not just a logo, but because I work in cyber, my webcam is disabled. So I'm not AI, I'm real. So I feel free to ask any questions in the chat as we go along, and we're excited to be here. Like Travis mentioned, I'm part of the statewide Information Analysis Center. We can see that here on the slide. And a little bit more about the SIAC. Basically, a little history there since Travis kind of gave a history of the Cyber Center. Fusion centers roughly kind of came out of the evolution from 9/11 commission report and are basically a fusion center. It's in the name, trying to fuse a bunch of different information and share that with a bunch of different stakeholders to try to protect our state, protect our municipalities, private entities, and our nation as a whole. So we have a cyber team that I'm a part of, strategic intel analyst, technical analyst, cyber threat hunter analyst, and cyber outreach coordinator analyst. And we kind of share roles, but we have different fortes, and we're part of that. And it's just a really fun gig. And so that's who we are. As Travis mentioned, we're kind of trying to use this metaphor of a journey as and mapping that onto cybersecurity. We're going to talk about what you need for a journey. We're going to talk about some maps that you might need. Talk about the cyber defense matrix, the CIS controls, and other associated maps and frameworks that those you might encounter in the business. We're going to talk about some friends, a fellowship that you might encounter along the way. We're going to talk about some tools and some things that you might need to help you on your cybersecurity journey. As Travis mentioned, we're trying to thread the needle of giving something for everybody here. The cool thing about cybersecurity is that there's tools that help you get started and basics. And then there's also tools that help you if you're a Fortune 100 company or a very large organization. So let's just jump in. I have provided some very fun GIFs, so hopefully they're not distracting to you and they enhance the journey. So first of all, we need a map for our cybersecurity journey. And the first map that I want to talk about is the Cyber Defense Matrix. The Cyber Defense Matrix was developed by Sunil Yu, and it's a really great way to get a bird's eye view of cybersecurity in whole. I have the URL here at the bottom of the webinar screen if you want to pull it up on your own time or copy that down. Basically, the Cyber Defense Matrix takes the 5 functions of the cybersecurity framework. So I've snuck in another framework, another map within a map here. But NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, they do a lot of awesome stuff, and they developed the cybersecurity framework as a voluntary framework for organizations that are outside of the purview. Maybe they don't need to follow 853 or other NIST frameworks and documentation. So they made this cybersecurity framework, or the CSF, and they've divided the functions of it into 5 different slots. Now, technically, for those of you in the business, there is a cybersecurity framework 2.0 that recently was published. Basically, they added governance as slash policy as a way to kind of conceptualize this idea that policy and procedure and governance needs to be split amongst all of those functions, and through an organization needs to be permeate the whole organizational response to cybersecurity. So that's not on this piece of the slide, but it is fitting still well with the cyber defense matrix. The purpose of these 5 functions is to obtain cybersecurity balance and to avoid imbalance. So, for example, if you spend all of your money on really great network protection, firewalls, an outside wall, a perimeter, let's say, but let's say there's a small little vulnerability and the bad guys can get in. And hypothetically, if you don't have any resourcing or the detect function, so you can't detect if somebody is in your network or not. And you can't detect if someone's encrypting your endpoints for like a ransomware attack, then you're out of balance. Your resources need to be aligned in that way. Or let's say you have good endpoint protection, but you actually haven't done much to resource the identify function, and you don't know what your assets are, you're also out of balance. Or maybe if you haven't spent any money scanning for vulnerabilities in your infrastructure as a preventative or protection type of activity, you're out of balance. So that's the idea. We want to be in balance in our cybersecurity journey. So we'll talk about it in a second, but the cyber defense matrix takes those functions into account. Another issue that we run into again and again in our cybersecurity business is just check the box ITIS, as I call it. So that happens if cyber insurance comes to you and they say you need to do XYZ to get cyber insurance, or you're filling out something about all these controls. You need to be HIPAA compliant, CMMC compliant, Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, whatever it is. And they ask you, do you have MFA? And you're like, yes, we do. And you kind of get lulled into this. I'm trying to check the box. I'm trying to get this done. This is not my day job to fill out forms, but this just landed on my desk. But the problem with these questions is sometimes we are not thinking in the full breadth of the question and the implications. So perhaps you have MFA on email, your Outlook or your Google email, but do you have MFA when you have to log into your computer on Windows? Or do you have MFA on your database server? What about your developer environment, your code repository? Do you have MFA on your network applications? What about every single other application that you've outsourced to other organizations? Do you have a good inventory of that? Do you have full MFA deployment really? So we want to avoid just checking the box because we've seen, for example, in cyber insurance world, people not getting paid out cyber insurance, if you can even qualify anymore, because people check the box or MFA or something of that nature. And then when they came around and inspected, they said, well, you didn't have MFA on this, so you basically lied on the form. We're not going to pay. So it's really important that we have a good map. And this is where the cyber defense matrix comes in. So I mentioned these 5 functions at the top: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Really good stuff. And that is the x-axis. As you can see, the y-axis helps us identify the different types of assets that are in our organizations: devices, applications, networks, data, users. You could imagine more categories, I suppose, but I think this is a good way to get going here. And basically, these other little pieces on the bottom talk about degree of dependency. So like I just mentioned at the top, now the NIST cybersecurity framework has a governed category. And this is the CDM has incorporated that here, basically saying no matter if you're talking about identifying your assets, detecting compromised assets, or responding to threats or recovering assets, you need to have good processes, good policies, and good governance to control those. Another thing that's interesting in the industry is this degree of dependency slide. And this is not a hard and fast rule. It's just a general observation that we kind of need to be aware of. The more to the right of the matrix you are, the more you have to rely on people. You need a good incident response team. You're going to need a good digital forensics team. You need a good backup team, etc. Whereas there's a lot of more tooling that we can rely a little bit more on technology on the protecting and identifying side of the matrix. So that this is the cyber defense matrix. And there's a lot of good stuff that we could go through about this. There's a whole book that's written about this. If you want some light reading before bed, I would encourage you to pick this up. I believe it's a free download if you just give your email to that one organization that uses it. Basically, the whole kind of idea is that you could play bingo with the cyber defense matrix, right? We don't want to have check the box itis. We don't want to say, yeah, we have MFA. We want to think, well, do we have MFA on our devices, our networks, our applications, our data, and our users, right? Who's protecting the users? What's protecting the data? What's protecting the apps? Again and again, you can kind of talk about these things. What's helpful is that this also helps you when you're shopping. Sunil, in his book, uses the metaphor of a marketplace. And there's a lot of different things that are out there. There's EDR, MDR, XDR. And sometimes, unfortunately, these things are marketing speak. And really, it's hard to discern the difference between one provider's EDR might be equal to another provider's XDR or EPDR or whatever the acronym is. So this kind of can help where you can say, oh, I think an XDR should be able to protect and detect my devices and my networks. But maybe another product, you could ask them, does this detect any application or any data? What are the integrations there? So that'd be one thing. It helps you wade through some marketing jargon. Of course, it also helps you self-assess, as we've kind of implicitly talked about. Do I have coverage in these areas? And these other kind of overlays here, you can see, you could think of it like if you're going to the market, you might have a recipe that you need to purchase a certain type of product at the marketplace because maybe HIPAA compliance requires it. But perhaps another thing is a really high risk or a non-negotiable business constraint. We all know that certain types of users require certain types of environments. For example, it might not be practical to turn off local administrative control for a web developer, but maybe it's appropriate at a call center or help desk level. So you might have specific business constraints or risks based on your type of business or organization that you can use the cyber defense network and matrix to kind of compare and contrast. And my kind of final word is I know that there's a lot of great products out there, and I doubt that anyone on this call has an infinite budget. So remember, we're playing bingo here. We're not playing blackout. You don't necessarily have to get a product or a check mark in every single box. It's mostly just a map, again, for our journey. So that's the cyber defense matrix. Now, another map. So, we're talking multiple maps here, maps within maps, is the CIS Critical Security Controls. Now, we kind of talked about like, is this a map or more like a tool? It's a little of both, right? Sometimes you need a little bit more practical guidance and a little bit more practical itinerary or packing list for your journey. And the Center for Internet Security developed these critical security controls in a specific order, in a prioritized order. And so, especially for those of you who might be overwhelmed by the amount of cybersecurity tasks that are on your plate, this might be a way to break that logjam because besides of so if you're under resourced, let's say, what we see again and again is that just check the box itis, where you're like, yeah, I guess we have MFA. Do we have backups? Yes. And then again, you're just rushed or it's not your full-time job. And so you're just trying to check these boxes. But it's just an unfortunate reality that you're kind of maybe cutting some corners there. The other thing that we see from time to time when you're doing a assessment against these controls is let's say if you're going against the cybersecurity framework controls and you're going through all these identify steps, you kind of might get stuck in that box, in that category, in that function. You're going through and you're like, well, we have this, well, we have a spreadsheet somewhere that has our assets. And then I guess this developer knows the network kind of. But then it talks about, well, do you have an automated thing? Do you have this asset system? Do you do this? And then you kind of get burnt out on those most advanced of the controls. So the CIS, we'll talk about it in the next slide, it has implementation groups. So you can make sure you're not getting burnt out and you make sure you have the important bases covered. So version 8.1 has these 18 different categories. They're very common sense, very practical. And they have these implementation groups so that if you're starting or assessing your cybersecurity journey for a first time, or you're relatively new on the journey, or maybe you've never assessed yourself against these controls, you would want to start with IG1 and see how you're doing against basic cyber hygiene. Then once you're done with those 56, then you would graduate to IG2 and then IG3. And so that is really cool about the CIS controls. You can see an example here. 6.1, for example, we're in the access control management family, the control. And so we're trying to think about how access control happens. The first one is establish and follow a process, preferably automated, for granting access to enterprise assets upon new hire, rights, grant, or role change. And then as you can see, 6.2 is establish a access revocation process. So those are very tactical, targeted, simple instructions. And those are a little easier to follow. And so what we don't want is that you're going through, or like, we got to do all of control number 6. And then you get down to 6.7, centralized access control for all enterprise assets through directory or SSO, or maybe you're on 6.8. Okay, what does role-based access control mean? And that seems more complex. And then so you spend all your time getting stuck at 6.8 instead of going to the basics in control group 7. I think it makes sense. And I see no questions, so we will proceed. Those have been some maps, some tooling. And now I'm going to pass it back to Travis to talk about who are the friends that we should add to our fellowship.
Great. Thanks, Ben. So maps, any good maps, also good to have those friends along the way. So I've kind of put up a few of the friends that I'm going to mention here. There are others out there that are good resources as well. I'm just not going to get into much detail on them. If some of you here probably are aware, maybe some aren't, but Utah Saint is a good group to join. There's also a local IT, municipality IT group that kind of meets periodically throughout the year that I'm sure some of you are part of, or some of you may not be. We'd be happy to get you in touch with either of those groups if you're interested. But my focus today is on these friends. So you got the SIAC and the Cyber Center, and we'll talk about those more later. But we'll start off with CISA. So CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, federal entity, they have 2 representatives here in Utah, and maybe some of you have interacted with them, Rick and Rob Montgomery. And we can always get you in contact with them if you're interested in that, or if you've already contacted them, then great, I can continue to help you. But CISA has a lot of good resources that are available and through these friends, CISA. There's on their website, you can go there and see a lot of the resources that they do have. I kind of put up a quick little piece of just like recent things that they've posted on their website. So they have information such as, detecting and mitigating Active Directory or K through 12 anonymized threats, so school threats and guidance for that kind of a response. But they also have several free tools, and the representatives, Rob and Rick, they are available to do assessments. So we've talked about these maps and these guides. These guys can come and help do those assessments with you, so you can see where you are at right now and get recommendations of where to go. Next slide. Another good one, if you guys aren't aware of it, is the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. So there's a lot of information sharing and analysis centers out there. You can join these. For instance, ones that municipalities may be interested in is there's one specifically for water infrastructure. There's ones for power infrastructure. There's ones that focus specifically on elections and voting type infrastructure. And then this MSISAC is the one that kind of focuses on government entities, both state and local government entities. Their mission really is similar to our mission. It's really to help kind of improve the cybersecurity posture for local government, state government, and they do that through multiple different ways, trying to communicate out things or coordinate. Anybody here can become a member of that. The website is off there to the right. That you can go to that website and end up on the MSISAC page. You can hit that join the MSISAC link and follow that through to apply. Next slide.
Well, hold on one second, Travis. We have a question, and I want to briefly touch on it, and then I want to circle back at the end and see if the question was answered. Basically, Nikki wrote in saying, hey, I'm feeling a little lost. Who should be watching this training? We're a small city, don't have a budget for a lot of these things. Feels like everything we're talking about is for IT people, and we don't have a budget for them. In a moment, Nikki, we're going to share some tools that the Cyber Center can do to assist you with practically and with some tooling. And then in addition, everything we've talked about so far has been free to join and things like that. And then we're going to end with some very practical, like top 5 things for you if you don't have any IT budget. The 5 things that we would encourage you to make sure you have in your organization, even if you don't have an IT person. But please feel free to comment back in again when we have time for questions to see if we've answered a little bit of that. Thank you. And Travis, continue.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. So talking more about that MSISAC, again, off to the right-hand side, there's a link there, how you can go and join. But to Nikki's point, it is daunting. MSISAC is one of those entities that kind of can help with some of those resources that are available to help entities like yours with different things that are both no-cost cybersecurity tools, as well as webinars and things that they do to help kind of walk you through, hey, you're on a shoestring budget. How do you do cybersecurity? So they have those kinds of resources available. One of the good resources that we like to kind of tout is what's called the Nationwide Cybersecurity Review, so the NCSR. So if you join the MSISAC, you have the opportunity to participate in this NCSR. So next slide. So this NCSR, it links back to kind of what we've talked about already. It links back to the CIS controls and the maps there. So those controls giving you a kind of a guide post to, hey, I should do this. Well, the NCSR is a very simple way, asks you some simple questions about what resources you do have and where you are currently at, and then gives you basically things that you can do to improve. So it will score you kind of on a scale of, I believe it's 1 to 7, and then it will kind of compare you to other entities of your size and type, so other municipalities. And then it will give you kind of ideas of like, okay, you don't have any asset management for your computers that you hand out to your employees. Here's a way that you could do asset management. And here is a specific spreadsheet that you could use for that. And so it's a good way to kind of check in every year to see where you were and kind of where you're going, and kind of go from there. And it links exactly to the CIS controls. So next slide. I think this is yours, Ben.
Yes. So basically, we're talking about our friends at MSISAC, at CISA. We're talking about our friends and and what they can provide. One of your friends that I'd like to ask you to, please be our friend is the SIAC. And I wanted to explain a little bit more what that's like with the SIAC, and if you have cyber information, that you could share with us. So bear with me, Nikki. This is stuff but you might think this is overwhelming if you're a little smaller thing. So we never want to add anything to someone's plate. We're just trying to get information to where it belongs, right? So this is where I say, sorry, Nikki, but I wanted to explain some of the stuff that we could use at the SIAC. Some of you might be IT people. Some of you might already be familiar with these types of things. But in case you're not, I just have a brief idea. We're looking for any IOCs, any indicators of attack, any indicators of compromise, a strange email, send us an email header with that information. If you have any TTPs, tactics, techniques, procedures, something that a bad actor used to try to get into your system, or you found a little bit of a compromise, we want to know that information. If you are familiar with vulnerabilities and the CVEs, the common vulnerabilities and exposures, IDing system for those, that's what those sort of things, if you ever see that, that's what that looks like. That tracks specific vulnerability in software or firmware, and then how severe it is. So if you're aware of a specific vulnerability, again, speaking to the IT people here, if you know that they're targeting a certain type of firewall with a certain type of CVE, we want to know that as well. If you see artifacts like hashes, long strings like this that track the unique ID of a file, like a malware hash or a virus hash. If you have specific IP addresses that, if it's either IPv4 or IPv6, they look like that, or these two right there. And then, like I mentioned, email headers. So basically, that's what information that is valuable to us in the cyber domain looks like. And that's the sort of stuff that we would love if you could send to the SIAC, because our job is to gather information from the bottom up so that we can tell other states and federal partners what type of tactics, what type of stuff is going on so that we can defend our nation. And also, we're going to get that same stuff from the top down. And so we have a SIAC Intel portal that you can request to join. If you're an authorized agency, an entity, we can add to that, and we can send out information to you as well about the sort of tactics and attacks that are happening. So that's a little brief point about what we're looking for. This is some of our information. You can reach out to us. Of course, we have non-cyber teams. There's threats to physical infrastructure. If there's threats to, a school shooting threat, whether you're not sure if it's a hoax or not, you can reach out to us. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of great teams over at the SIAC, and that's our job. So please reach out to us. Your information might be the missing piece of the puzzle that helps solve a problem, and you receive relevant and timely intel in return. So that's why we ask you to share. Back to you, Travis.
Thanks. All right, so far we've mentioned the CISA, MSISAC, the SIAC, where all those friends that are available, but also the Utah Cyber Center. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the Utah Cyber Center is solely is created recently in statute, and these are basically the duties that we have. And so this is why we exist. So we're really here to kind of help as consultants, if you will, as well as to do these things, basically share that cyber threat intelligence that Ben talked about, to kind of promote, develop, and share the cybersecurity best practices. So like, what should entities be implementing or doing when it comes to cybersecurity, and how to go about that. Coordinating response. So if you actually are attacked, we can kind of help with that. Identify funding sources or resources that we can give to you to help you in those circumstances where they're big or small, and you could use those resources. And really to help with things like incident response plans or policies and things of that nature, and kind of doing this all in a collaborative effort using the public and the private sector and the education sector to try to kind of help combat this cybersecurity issue, if you will. So next slide. So some things that can help you out. We have part of our operations is our Security Operations Center. So in the case of a breach, you can contact us and we can do some things for you if you need that assistance. If you don't, then no problem. But we can basically kind of do research or review and identify the scope of the breach. We can, look into forensically what happened and where the attack came from, what they targeted, as well as just give guidance of what should you do now that you have been breached. So we're available. We have 24/7 on call. We'll give the contact information later. If you run into an issue, we can respond and help you with that. Additionally, we can do things like web application scanning. So those of you who have, websites or web applications out there for your local citizens to use to access the resources, we can help by scanning those and identifying if they have vulnerabilities and how you can make sure that those holes are patched up. And we also provide services in the penetration testing area. So let's say you have several security services already, but you're interested in seeing how secure they are. Our Security Operations Center can help kind of test those and see if, they have been configured properly or the security is as you think it should be. So next slide. Additionally, we are working with UVU on a couple of things. One of those things is we have kind of very simple annual survey that we're using and going to be pushing out to government entities to respond to. This kind of gives us information to see where all the different entities, government entities throughout the state are at in their, cybersecurity journey, and whether they have funding or don't have funding. And then we take this information and it's requested by the legislature. We work through the Cybersecurity Commission and we pass this information up to the legislature, and then the legislature is able to consider recommendations for, okay, these are the issues that are out there and this is why those things aren't being addressed, whether it's money or personnel or otherwise, and come up with a plan or way to possibly fund and help with these things. And the other thing that we are doing with Utah Valley University is they are helping in an effort to kind of create an online library because we have found that a lot of entities either don't have proper policies or procedures in place, don't even know where to start with templates. So they're kind of helping us gather those things. Next slide. As an example, we talked today about the CIS controls. One of the things that they are helping develop is basically a very simple and quick guide of what are the CIS controls, and then diving down into those controls. For example, on the right there, Safeguard 1.1, we kind of get into more of layman's terms of, hey, what is an asset inventory? What is included in that? why is it important? And if you don't have one, how that can affect you. And so it's trying to really break that CIS controls down into bite-sized chunks that everybody can kind of absorb and take one at a time. So next slide. Also, as an example for the policies, hey, you've been attacked, but you don't have a plan, an incident response plan. So we have the basics for that. So we have guides that kind of help walk you through how to develop an incident response plan, who should be involved, what things should you consider in a cyber attack, and how you guys are going to react to that cyber attack given the resources that you do have, and who can you reach out to in those circumstances. All that can be built out through these guides and things that we have. Next slide. All of this information is being built, probably going to be launched in the next couple of weeks, but it can be found on our website. So cybercenter.utah.gov. Along with other resources that we talk about there. So next slide. Now, I know some of the attendees already have some of the services I'm going to talk about, but those who don't or aren't aware of them is kind of why these slides are here. So we are offering a few different tool sets and services to kind of help protect the local governments, and everybody is eligible. We'll have a way for you to contact us if you're interested towards the end of this. But essentially, we have SentinelOne. All of these programs, just a note, are paid for through the end of 2027 through grant funding. And then we're working with the legislature right now to have ongoing funding for these after that time. So the first one is SentinelOne. This is obviously a service that protects your individual computers or your servers, whether you have Windows or Mac machines or Linux machines. It is a service that helps protect those machines from malware. It is an advanced service, so it's not just your old antivirus that a lot of machines have on there. It actually does other things with looking at kind of the day-to-day operations or how people interact, or they know kind of the habits or things that attackers do, and they look for those things to protect those systems. Along with this, we have a 24/7 monitoring that is provided by SentinelOne. So they watch that system and they respond to any threats as they come up. So in those cases where you don't have a big team, this team is watching for those attacks and remediating those issues as they come up. And it also gives you some other bells and whistles, like understanding your computers and the software on those computers and whether they're vulnerable. Things of that nature. So next slide. Another tool set that we have for entities is a software platform called KnowBe4. This is kind of to combat that area of the human element. So it provides training and security awareness training, as well as we have compliance training in there. And that compliance training can hit on things like CIS training or harassment training or things like that. So it can be used for a lot of things. It also has phishing testing that can be done. So you can kind of send phishing emails to your employees to try to teach them things that they should be looking for so they don't click on these emails. That is also available. Next slide. For those who don't have the capability to implement this system on their own, we have the ability to implement it for you from our side. We send out monthly security messages or training campaigns and do phishing campaigns as well on your behalf. And we just kind of work that out with the entity. So next slide. And then for those who have IT staff that want to become more cybersecurity savvy, we have basically certification training that they can sign up for and do. We did one in June. We just finished one in September. We'll have more next year. Or if you have staff that are going to become more IT savvy, or your IT staff, and they want to learn more about cybersecurity, they can also participate in this kind of training. Next slide. So here's how you sign up. You can try that QR code. I promise you it doesn't download any malware for you. If you're reticent to do that, you can simply send an email to cybercenter@utah.gov if you're interested in any of those services or have any other questions, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. Next slide. So all this said, what is the call to action? What are we saying? So the first thing that we would recommend that anybody do, no matter your size, is basically do kind of a gap assessment. And you can do a gap assessment using some of the resources we've talked about, or you can simply just get together with the appropriate people in your organization. Whether that's if you have IT people or not, who are your executives, your HR team, if you have legal or don't, and just kind of look at your business process. What is going on in your environment? What is important that if it was attacked through a cyber attack and went down would be a problem for your citizens? So you identify those things and you identify what computers you have or what software you have and what protections that you know of that you have in place, and kind of start there. And once you understand your business process and where you're at, then you can kind of walk into some of these other things that we're talking about. Next slide. So in recap, and then we can address any questions that might be out there. Basically, what we're saying is there are these maps out there, these CIS control maps, etc., that can be used to gradually work your way through what you should be doing to improve your cybersecurity hygiene. And even though that exists, it might be still overwhelming for some. We do have those friends available to help you walk through this. There's CISA, us at the Cyber Center, the SIAC, MSISAC. We all have resources available. We can walk you through these things and consult on where you should go or how you should start. And we also have some tool sets that can get you down the path to some degree. So use the maps, do an assessment. So do a quick business or internal business or risk review or gap assessment, and join the MSISAC. Do the NCSR yearly. Given all that, if you're still like, hey, where do I go? Where do I start? Take advantage of the following tools and basically start here. So the ones highlighted in blue: security awareness training, endpoint protection, vulnerability management. Those are all things that we provide right now and can get you set up for free on. And you'll note on the side, I kind of noted that these all tie back to the CIS controls and the particular controls that they tie back to. So if you need to start anywhere, start here. Start with us, start with these free tools, and then start going down this other list, learning how and to encrypt your data, or using firewalls and proper configuration, email security, or getting backups of your data. These are the recommendations we have for starting out. And again, we're available to talk more through this and kind of help people along that path or that journey. With that, I think we'll kind of open up for more questions and see if there's anything else that we can answer.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. And Mickey chimed in with a question that you might be, I think I know the answer, but I want you to double check me. Does that endpoint protection product contain a password manager?
It does not. It does not contain a password manager. So,
and I'm kind of going off the top of my head, Mickey. So I want you to put an asterisk between, whatever I say doesn't represent everybody for all time and all places, but there's definitely some built-in password managers on, of course, web browsers like Google Chrome or Edge. So that'd be one way. And I think there's some tools that you could do as administrators to kind of manage that or control that. You could block those browsers from being used for one, I think, or you can manage that. Another thought is if you're very budget constrained, there are free and open source password managers. Again, free and open source comes with some of their own risks. It's kind of a risk reward situation. But of course, we've seen with LastPass, they were a paid for product and they were attacked and got breached and things like that. So there's also risks with going for paid for products. So a free and open source product is Bitwarden, and I believe that's free for personal use. And I think they have some small paid for teams. So that would be some options if you're budget constrained to look for. And Anthon said LastPass, and here I am just disparaging them. But that's the thing is, there's risks and rewards, right? So you want to do your research a little bit and make sure that just because you're going with a named company doesn't mean you're guaranteed safety. It still means you have to do your due diligence. If you go with LastPass, you need to know, oh, they've had a history of being targeted. What have they done to, what have they said they're going to do to be better architected in the future, right? And then with a password manager, you have to be aware of um, if you're breached, you then need to go through. So if you were a LastPass customer, personally, professionally, you need to go back and realize I might be at risk with this data breach of being leaked, and I might want to go back and change all my passwords. So you have to kind of be aware and plugged in. So great questions. Nikki, feel free to chime in too if we've answered a little bit of your questions. And yeah, anyone else have any questions? Mickey is asking, can you handle hybrid architectures? I'm
Yes.
assuming. Oh, go ahead, Travis.
No, go ahead.
We might need to talk more, Mickey, to make sure we're understanding. I'm wondering if what you're talking about is if you have servers in Azure or AWS or something like that, and then you also have on-premises servers. And I'm wondering, maybe you're referring to the endpoint protection product, if we can install agents on servers in the cloud. Travis, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, if we're talking about the endpoint product, it can be put on, any type of VM hosted machine or server you have on site. And if you have a mix of Mac versus Microsoft devices, it doesn't matter. It can take care of that.
Perfect. And it looks like Mickey's saying their website and emails hosted at Xmission and their local computers for database. So any comments on, let's see. I know we have the .gov service, right, Travis, for email and website?
Yes. So, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are aware, but .gov legislature passed the statute saying that everybody needed to move over to .gov. If anybody needs assistance with how to get started on that or what to do, you can contact us and we can get you more information about that.
Yeah, but I don't think at this time with this initial offering, we don't have additional web or email filtering or tooling. Is that correct,
Correct.
Travis? Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, but those local computers could definitely get that endpoint protection on them.
Yes.
Anthon said, how do we get those CIS maps that you showed? Let me go back. This might break my slides. Basically, these URLs at the bottom is where you would get the CIS controls. So that's CIS or CI security.org/controls. And then the cyber defense matrix is cyberdefensematrix.com. And so we hope that we have kind of covered a wide spectrum. It's hard with cybersecurity to not throw people into the deep end on one hand, but also not to regurgitate a bunch of stuff for those that are a little further on the journey. So we hope we've added some additional resources for those that are further along in the journey, but we hope that these tools can be a starting point for those that are new. And we ultimately are trying to be a rising tide that raises all boats. Because if you're a small town, you are just as exposed on the internet as a big municipality, right? That's just the reality of our global internet infrastructure. And so we want to make sure that you're doing the basics like MFA, like email security. There's a lot of stuff if you're paying for Microsoft, you're paying for Google, there's a lot of stuff that you're probably paying for that you could do inside of your environment to make some good controls and make sure things are turned on. And that kind of, I would also just throw this one last idea out here that you want to not forget policies. You want to make sure that your human element is trained, right? We are the weakest link. And sometimes you got to work smarter, not harder, right? So this is kind of an extreme example, but you could remove as much of your business off of email as possible, as an extreme example. And then, if you could move as much of that over to Teams or Google Chat or whatever it is, right? Because those are systems you have to log into to chat with somebody in your organization, whereas email is external, so somebody can pretend to be you. So that's an example of if you're constantly getting phishing emails, try to think smarter, not harder. Instead of beating people over the head and saying you need to be better at catching phishing emails, maybe change how you do business a little bit to reduce the risk. So those are some thoughts. I don't see any other questions. Oh, anonymous attendee asks, where will we be able to get a recording of this? And I think Molly said that it will be on the YouTube page. And Molly, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then
Yeah,
you can
that
take
is
us
correct.
out.
Absolutely, I can do both. Perfect. So yes, thank you to those of you who attended with us today. We will be posting this on our YouTube page. And I just want to give a big thank you to both Travis and Ben for taking the time to walk us through this. They're also available and great if you have additional questions. And thanks for your time today, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.